this week's Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Carajane. Carajane is the president and partner of Hunt Big Sales, and she's been there for the last 13 years. As a serial entrepreneur, she has proven her ability to develop new business and forge critical relationships, which is so important nowadays if we're going to grow and scale our organizations. She is a CEO and co-author of The Secret of Big Sales, which we'll no doubt dive into during the podcast, and Life After Death of Selling, How to Thrive in the New Era of Sales. Carajane, you're very, very welcome. It is Carajane Moore, isn't it? Just to make sure
Yes,
that I'm absolutely
Carajane Moore, yeah.
everything right
Perfect.
around that. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and why sales is such an important passion of yours.
Yeah, so I'm a Midwestern girl, grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and started working at the young age of 14, like a lot of us. And yeah, so Omaha actually is an interesting because it was the home of SAC Command. So we had telemarketing, the upscaled telemarketing communications in the area. And so we had a lot of telemarketing firms. And so at 14, I was eligible to answer phones. And so we started on the phones at 14 and myself and my brothers. And so have been working for a long time,
Surely not. I'm saying you're 14, but I mean, it's not surely not that long.
Right. Thank you. So yeah, and it's interesting as in the world of sales, I would say starting at 14, I answered calls, but I quickly moved to being on the phone, and that became just a natural thing for us. I talked to people all the time, people I didn't know, people calling in. I started doing calls out. It was a great way to make money at that time at my age. And so started there, went on to college. Then after that, went into the telemarketing industry. My brothers did the same thing. And then from there, I went off and ran my own small consulting firm, and they developed and grew very large telemarketing firms. And then at one point, it made sense. I said, hey, I'm coming back to the Midwest area. Tom lived in Indiana and his business was growing. And I said, hey, I'm coming back to the area. Would it be beneficial if I stepped in and helped on sales since you're being really busy delivering? He goes, that sounds great. I'd love that. Wow. So we started working together, 13 to 17 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your relationship with Tom?
He's my brother.
His brother. Yeah. Thought as much. Yeah. Just to give some context to this podcast, I met up with Carajane only a few months back when we were in Nashville together. Carajane was on stage wowing us all again about the importance of big sales and no things we'll no doubt dive into a bit more. But just dive back a bit. You said that you kind of, before you joined this organization, you had a number of other smaller businesses that you set up. What were your key learnings from setting up and growing those early organizations, Carajane?
Yeah, entrepreneurial. First of all, I love the freedom of being an entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. It allows me to build the life that I want to live and be responsible for my own production and my own income. I did work for large organizations, very large in the medical side of the house. And so I always blew out my quota, but they capped what income I could make. And so I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur more so than to continue to do the large company thing. And so I learned that one, I can't do it all myself. I have to be able to use others. Two, I need a coach because we all have blind spots, and I needed somebody to speak into decisions, ideas, thoughts that I was running in my business alone. And three, your mindset limits you. Whatever you think about is real. So those would be some of the core learnings in my early years as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Did you have any setbacks that you can remember at all that you had to overcome, you had to have the resilience to get over it all?
Oh my gosh. Lots of setbacks. Lots of setbacks. So I'll start with one of the businesses that I ran. I designed and built beach houses.
Okay.
And so then we also rented them and that type of thing. And so had several beach houses going, and beach houses, as we know, generally are a luxury item. They were a rentable item that people would come and do the vacations. And in 2007, with the crash of the economy, but more importantly, the crash of the mortgages and the financial industry, people were not traveling. They weren't coming to the beach houses. I now have several beach houses sitting empty, right? Costing me quite a bit of money. And that was a hard, painful experience. And then the lending industry dropped, so you couldn't sell them. So you were stuck with them. And so there were some key learnings there. Don't have all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yeah.
By having all of your eggs in one basket, you set yourself up at a level of risk that maybe you're not prepared for.
Yeah. And I think some of those signs, and we've just seen, haven't we, over the last couple of years, that none of us could really predict a pandemic or the invasion in Ukraine that has maybe a potentially really adverse impact on our respective businesses.
Absolutely. And you don't anticipate them. I mean, I guess there's that benefit of us being, I'm a salesperson, so I'm always optimistic, right?
Yeah.
But I think that generally people are optimistic. And so we project what's going great right now into the future, or if things aren't going great now, sometimes we also project those into the future. And just having that awareness of where we are right now, look at the other signs around us, because that is part of those limitations that I mentioned earlier.
Very much so. So I want to give over most of this podcast today to this whole area of sales. And I would imagine for actually most entrepreneurs, they're probably also, when they first start out, the head of sales and the chief revenue officer or whatever it is, because it just goes with the territory.
Right.
First part of the question is, from what you're doing now, what makes you guys different in
Sure.
sales? What are the things that differentiate you? Because there must be so many other consultancies and organizations that are designed to help people improve their sales skills. What really makes you guys different?
Yeah, there's, I think, several things that make us different. First and foremost, we really focus in the niche of large sales
Okay.
that are 5 to 10 times the size of an average sale. That's
Okay.
one.
So what would
Two,
be a large sale, just to give context?
well, once again, it's 5 to 10 times the size of an average sale.
Yeah.
But most of the companies that we work with are looking at large sales being greater than $1 million.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I have clients that they're hundreds of millions of dollars are their large sales as well. So it depends on the industry. It depends on what's going on, but it's a 5 to 10x of an average sale is a large sale. So we focus in that particular area, but we also focus in the entrepreneurial world, 15 million to 250 million in size, who are really trying to compete against larger competitors for those larger pieces of business. We are a David versus Goliath approach into the marketplace. There aren't a lot of players like us in consulting that focus on those large sales specifically. So the fact that that's where we go, business to business complex sales is kind of the market segment that we work with, the size of organizations that we work with, the size of deals that we work with. But lastly, we have a proprietary process and system to take small businesses and help them compete against larger competitors for those larger pieces of business. And then we jump in the trenches with them and help them run those processes and systems to get the outcomes they're looking for. So those are the pieces that differentiate us versus other consultants out there who are consulting based on their experience, which is great, because we have experience as well, but also who are doing skills and techniques. Ours assumes that the salespeople have the skills, and we're now talking about team sales for large opportunities, multi-people on your side, multi-people on your prospect side, and how do we interact and make a full process work?
Definitely. And I think one of the things that it took out from the secret to big sales is this notion of you call the layer cake.
Yes.
You talk about just there about, you're going to be more than likely not dealing with one particular buyer when you get these complex sales, and maybe many different levels of the organization that you need to understand and the idiosyncrasies that may be in there to master this particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the other thing is when we talk about the layer cake, let me add a little bit of clarity maybe for your listeners, right? Layer cake really talks about the different levels in an organization, from a manager to a director to a VP to a C-suite. so each of those layers is a level. And so a manager level. And what is a manager buying? What can they buy? What did they value? What is the time horizon they think in? How do they talk about money versus a director versus a VP or a CXO? And so here's the thing, that one of the secrets in the book that you talk about, one of the secrets to big sales is you get sent to whom you sound like. So if you sound like a manager, you're going to be stuck at a manager level. And I am sure you have clients, and we've all experienced this, where we're talking to somebody that we really think should be our buyer. And they go, you know what? This sounds interesting. I think you should talk to XYZ in another department at a lower level. What does that tell you? You don't sound like them. You don't solve the problems that they have. And so the idea of the layer cake is you have to have the language and the focus at each level at the problems that they can solve in order to be relevant and resonate with them.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. Again, the granularity you went into, the understanding the different psychologists at that level, even to thinking about a vice president or a president or someone that might have been already in the company, come through the company, and maybe somebody who's brought in from outside the company, that there might be a totally different position that you need to take, because they're kind of their needs or their outcomes they're looking for may be very different.
100%. And that's why it's really important that, one, you know, you're the buyer that you're speaking to, you understand the problem that they're trying to solve. We can't come in and sell our services, our pieces. They can't hear that if we can't demonstrate to them we understand that the problem that they're trying to solve, we're experts in solving it, and this is how we've solved it before. Then they can hear us. Otherwise, we sound like everybody else trying to sell what we do, instead of, in today's world, we have to be the expert that demonstrates we understand them and understand the problems they're trying to solve.
So how much time do you typically help people really, when you're coaching them, understand? Well, let's just go right to the beginning about the importance of preparation and really getting granular about understanding that organization that you're going to be potentially pitching to, or putting a big sales pitch to. How do you advise people to really prep in a very thorough manner, so that when they come to all these different layers, but also understanding what the problem that needs to be solved, it looks like? How do you help people when they're at that very first stage?
Oh my gosh, we could talk on this for days, right?
Great, yeah.
So I'm going to try to contain it into a shorter or a smaller picture, but there's a lot to it, as you know. First and foremost, if we're showing up as the expert, we already know the problem that they're trying to solve. And so my strong encouragement is, in today's market, don't show up and ask them to tell you the problem, because you no longer look like the expert. So you need to know the problem that they're trying to solve. And by the way, you solve that problem for your current customers all the time. You just have to understand what it is and the language that they use to describe that problem. So first and foremost, show up with you understanding what the problem is. But two, there should be a what we would call a company dossier. We're coming as a team. These large deals, it's a number of 9 to 11 people on our side, 9 to 11 people on their side that are going to be connecting. So we got to get our team prepped. So we have to have a document that says, these are the 9 to 11 people that we're going to meet. This is their titles. This is what they believe in or they're interested in. These are the things that we're going to need to convince them of. This is what's going on in their marketplace. These are the trends that are happening. This is what they bought last year, or who they bought it from, or why they bought it. This is why we're here and the problem we're solving. So you need a document that has all of that information if you're going to prep your team, so that we all come in with ourselves, our person matched to their person, talking about the right things in the right language, solving the right problems and fears each individual has. And that's to prep, like to start with, how do you get them to prep? Well, first we got to have a document that states all of the things. And then we got to meet with our team. How many of your clients, I know some of my clients, they got a couple people with them, they're driving to the account, or they're jumping on a Zoom call, and 5 minutes before they go, here's a document. Well, we got, blah, 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 blah. You got it. You want this. I want that. Okay, great. And we jump on a call. Well, that's
Isn't that called winging it?
And they're all winging it. And you know what? You look like you're winging it. And therefore, especially for $1 million deals or greater, they're wanting to hire experts, which means you've done this over and over. And if you look like you're winging it, you're scaring them and they don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, this whole area of becoming the expert in your space is so important. So in terms of getting the preparation to get it absolutely right, it's interesting. I can't remember it coaching, but I still use a yellow legal thing right now. And I was trying to use, this is a black pen right here, but to use a red pen when doing all the notes before a meet and letting the guys know how much time you've invested in research, in building out and understanding the problem that needs to be solved. Understand, to your point, all of their different characters that they've got there, just showing up. And again, that kind of, I guess, again, those first impressions, that if you look like you're the real deal, you've shown up, you're kind of looking professional about the way your demeanor is, gives confidence first up. Certainly if they've never heard of you before, which may be quite for a lot of the companies we work with. Maybe one of the challenges they've got, because I think you use the words David. If you're David and you're up against a sophisticated sales team as competitors, how do you stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also the idea is shifting. You talked about relationships and understanding relationships. Here's the thing. We used to do relationships pre-COVID, build relationships to build trust to get a buy, because we know trust is what gets the buy, right?
Yeah.
But that has shifted, and a lot of people haven't connected with that shift yet. That shift is now expertise to trust, to buy. Then you get the opportunity to build the relationship.
Yeah.
And so you have to show up as the expert to engage them. They don't want to engage with you just because they need a new friend or a cup of coffee, because we don't do it that way anymore, right? We're doing most of it remotely. So.
And how do you help people discover where these opportunities lie? Because I think for a lot of organizations I work with, I think they may have some of the skills, but it's actually finding these big opportunities. Okay, they might look at a tender or stuff like that, but how often do you manage to help people find the right opportunities to target?
Well, I think that that's a really interesting question, because it's first you have to start off with the idea of, who do I want to work with, right? And so that's first. Do you have a large account now that we want to look at that has the profitability that you like, understands what you do, understands your value, and you enjoy? So we're going to start there, and we're going to build out a persona. Everybody talks about an ICP, right? Your ideal client profile.
Yes.
I want to build out. And when I talk about an ideal client profile, I first want to talk about, what does the organization look like? Okay. What are it could be size of revenue. It could be square footage that you serve, depending on the problem you solve, right? So you've got it. And we use our system to do it. And I will tell you, to build that ICP, there's probably 10 to 12 characteristics. Not, are they the right size or the right logo? Because that's not worth your time. You want to understand, how do they buy? What is their geography? If that matters to you, are they going to pay their bills? What is those financial pieces? You want to understand the organization as a whole. And then you want to understand, how do they buy? Do they always go through Tinder? Is Tinder serve us, or does it not serve us? Right? So you want to understand how they buy. You want to truly understand, do they have the problem that we solve? And that's the next big piece of trying to target. So once you've defined all of that, it's very clear. Who do I want to go after? Right? So I'm working with a client, and we've built out their target filter, and it starts off with the idea that they're going to go after REITs. Okay. And within those REITs, they want to go after REITs that have 30 million square feet in their portfolio. Okay. We want to go after REITs that have $30 million in their portfolio that are commercial, not private. So you can start to see how we start to narrow down, where do we best solve the problem? And when you go after large deals, you're trying to eliminate 95% of the marketplace, so that you only have the 5% that are most ideal for you, that have the problem that you solve and have the urgency to solve it now. We don't want to go sell somebody they have a problem and then go try to sell them that we're the solution. Otherwise, that's a two-step sales process. It takes a lot longer. It's
Yeah.
very painful and expensive.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. I think where often people come unstuck is not having that clarity of who their core customer is, and if they do get an approach. I think when you first start out business, and indeed when you're scaling up, you kind of look at every opportunity as one that, right, we can go for that one and we can go for that one, and lo and behold, you have a scattergun approach. So I think I'm hearing you have been laser-like focused on where you do your best work.
Yeah, especially for large deals. You want to be laser like focused because it's very expensive and it's a different sales process. Once again, we talked about the fact that it's a team process. It's expensive to bring a team through a sales process like that for both you and your prospect. So you need to be laser focused on the large deals. I would say on your more standard deals, which we talked about, the average deals, I don't think you need to eliminate 95% of the marketplace, but we do want to eliminate those people that are kicking tires, doing a market scan of what the price points are in the marketplace. Those are people that waste your time.
Yes.
You still want to qualify those opportunities that are at the average so that your team is not wasting their time talking to people who are possibly interested, maybe doing a vendor swap, but they have no threshold of performance change that they need to accomplish to do the vendor swap. So you still have to be laser focused, but how it is a little bit different. Large accounts versus just your average account.
Yeah, and I think obviously the world is changing right now. Would you suggest there are any specific terms or language that people should be using when they are selling now? Has that changed at all?
Once again, for large deals, the language you're going to be using is about the problem, but it's going to be in terms of time, money, and risk. Big sales is about solving big problems for senior buyers. And senior buyers can solve time, money, risk problems. They don't solve speed, price, quality, service problems. That's done at a lower level. So what is the language? We need to elevate the language to the level, back to the layer cake you were talking about, the level. And in large deals, we're talking to a senior level person. And so time is not about delivery. It's about market and innovation and price is a lower level. Money is about market difference, significant difference in margin, right? Gross or net. Risk is about the risk profile, the uncertainties that senior organizations are trying to address or adjust for in their projections for the year. So you got to speak at that level to begin with for the language. Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of just some opportunities that you're helping your clients solve at the moment, some of the projects or stuff like that, that that you may well be putting a proposition towards, just to make it real for us?
Yeah, so this was a prospect I was talking to just the other day who's interested in going after the larger deals, and they have a couple large deals in their portfolio right now. They know the difference it makes. And they provide digital marketing services. Okay, that's what they do. But what's interesting is they have some additional technology that allows them to have insights that are significantly different than their competitors in the marketplace. But they still show up talking about SEO, talking about websites, talking about lead gen. They show up sounding like everybody else. And so in my conversation with them, I said, you sound like your competitors, and yet you provide a significantly different level of results. So you're going in the door of the marketing or chief marketing officer, potentially a director of marketing who's going to be handling the website or the SEO. What if you went in the door of the CEO, potentially the CMO, and had the conversation about the fact that you actually are going to hand them bags of money? That's what you do. You know the future of the market based on the trends of today and the projections that they are due to your technology. And so for every dollar they spend with you, you're going to give them $7 back. That's a different language than I'm going to adjust your SEO.
I'm just casting my mind back to when I had some significant sales responsibilities. I worked in the hospitality industry, and for a major global brewer, Molson Coors, which you obviously know about. And yeah, for us, yeah, we could well be going into a pub group in the UK that may have a contract which is worth 100 million for the supply of all their beer.
Right.
And you might have Budweiser or Carlsberg or Heineken as the incumbent brewer. And it really resonates with what you say now, because you certainly wouldn't go in there just as yourself. You'd have 4 or 5 of us going in and pitching into our respective counterparts, and then
Yes.
as the negotiations went on, it would be the CEO of Malta and Coors would be then having a CEO of the pub group to kind of just make sure that there's the right fit and understanding that we're able to deliver for next 4 to 5 years. But we'd already got most of the detail about our brands are going to work better than the existing brands. Our support is going to be better than, whatever it would look like, price, whatever that end up. So I think I can get a feel now in terms of my experience of the importance of getting all the right people, all the layer cake at these different levels, and understanding what each of the different drivers that everybody would be coming to, and the kind of the likely objections that it would do.
Yeah, exactly. And well, and even in the example you were talking about, the thing that's I think is important as you talk about those different layers and what you do and why they should be working with you versus a competitor, is if we take the language of smaller deals and we say that we are better than our competitor in speed or service or price, we're talking at a manager level because they're trying to compare us versus a competitor, right? But when we start talking about the language of time, money, risk, we're talking about, in your case, the pub group, how the pub group is going to beat their marketplace. So larger deals, higher in the organization. These are people concerned about how are they going to beat their competitors in their marketplace. Lower people, how do we compete against our competitors for that business? And I think that's an easy distinction to remember as how you're setting up those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it was probably 30 years ago now, maybe a bit more, when I was heading up this business unit. But we realized at the time that we needed to really up our game. We didn't have deep skill sets in these areas, so we had to bring in talent for the likes of Mars and P&G and then those areas that absolutely had a playbook, that how they went about negotiating big deals to get into supermarkets or of that. So it's so important to move your mindset and your thinking and your talent that you need if you're a smaller organization, if you're then being serious about being able to convince people and build that trust that you are going to be able to win these big deals in the future.
For sure. And like you said, the big players have a playbook. And you need to look like you have a playbook as well for those big deals.
Definitely. And I think, again, that's often that when you were working with a mid-market company, they have lots of areas that make them distinctive. They are super bright, a lot of them, they've got a sense of real purpose, but they don't have this playbook, or they don't have the skills when it moves from, well, we're quite happy being able to do the sort of 100,000 deals. We're good at that, but we're suddenly finding ourselves being outwitted every time we go to the million+ deals.
Yeah, and so that just is a nice layup to say that's why Hunt Big Sales started, is because we love working with the entrepreneur, this small mid-market player who keeps getting outwitted, because the game is the big always wants to buy from the big because they have the same language. And if we can elevate the language of these mid-markets and the playbooks by which you play, and we can kind of create that as a level field, entrepreneurial organizations are going to win more times than they're not, because the big buyers want to buy from the entrepreneurial organizations because they're more creative, they're more nimble, they have better solutions because the big players can't move as fast. Right? But as smaller players, we scare the big companies, and we don't understand that showing up the way we show up at our regular deals makes the big companies want to walk away. We scare them.
Yeah, it is. And actually, the coaching call I had slightly today was an organization now that actually most of their deal sizes are over $1 million, but it was only a couple of years ago that it was probably most of the deal sizes were closer to the 250,000. And they've had to build out competence in so many different areas. But one, they have to be of a certain size now, because a buyer looks at you and has that conversation. Have you got the capacity to
Yes.
deliver? I appreciate you've got all this entrepreneurial vigor and problem solving, but we want to know whether or not you're going to be around, or you've got the capacity to deliver, versus one of the big four providers in the industry that we'd normally go to. So I think that's another area that entrepreneurs have to kind of grapple with as they move from being a smaller company to this competent mid-market.
Absolutely, you have to grapple with that, because the big buyers are buying for years. They're solving a future problem. They're not
Yeah,
solving a today problem. So
yeah,
you absolutely have to do that. But here's one of the challenges that are limiting. We talk about mindsets and
yeah.
limiting these smaller players. The smaller players feel like they have to be this bigger size to compete for that deal. But we have all seen where that's not the way it ended up, right? The smaller
Mm,
deal was able to get done. Why? Because you don't have to think about what's in your four walls.
yeah,
Use your bank, use your vendors,
yeah.
bring other people to the buyer's table that help us as a small mid-sized company demonstrate our ability to manage that capacity, right? And so we keep thinking we got to solve it inside our four walls, instead of using the vendors, the relationships, the partnerships that we have
Yeah.
to bring the size, and all they're looking for is the confidence. And if I've got a bank that has confidence in me, who's going to lend against that
Yes.
future business,
Yeah.
if I've got a talent organization who has the talent, who's going to provide the people necessary, if you bring those players to the table, you then take their fear off the table, and allows you now to, once again, to compete on a level playing field. So I encourage all of your listeners to think about that differently. Again, don't
Mm,
let the concept that I have to be this size to compete because they're telling me this. What they're telling you is, I'm afraid. Take that fear away. And we internalize it because we're entrepreneurs and we're
yeah.
used to solving all the problems ourselves. And
Yeah.
if we rely on other people to solve the problems, other people to stand for us and partner with us to solve the problems, we can still gain those contracts today.
One of the things you talk about in the book is the importance of storytelling. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with are brilliant storytellers, but how do you bring that competence of storytelling into the big hunt sales process, or hunt for big sales process?
Well, I love the fact that you said, the entrepreneurs you work with are great storytellers. I will tell you, I think entrepreneurs are great storytellers.
Mm,
Their passion and their drive
yeah.
is what gets them a lot of the contracts and the relationships they have right now. So first and foremost, a lot of organizations don't understand why the storyteller of the executive doesn't translate down. Well, it's because they're unconsciously competent. They can't give you the structure of how they tell that great story. And we as an organization haven't captured that great story. So first and foremost, there are a variety of storytelling structures out in the marketplace. The book lists a few of them. Provide a structure to capture the stories of the organization in a way that has bullet points, hits a structure, so everybody can tell it, and tell it in a way that still has the impact that the story that the executive can tell.
Mm,
Use a storytelling structure. We also use the authority arc as one of our structures in there to provide data and information, to provide seniors the information necessary, but in a way that is compelling. And
mm,
so the authority arc is a 6-stage
yep.
conversational arc structure, back to the structures,
Yep.
starting with data. And so many times we want to come in and overwhelm them with the data of why we're the best or why we're great or what's going on. But we stop there. And then we jump to, and that's why you should like us, right? Instead of, you've got data, you need to analyze the data for them. You need to provide the implications, and the implications separate from analyzation is, what does that mean in the future implications, right? Then you got to provide options. Now that you have the implications, what are your options? And those options have to be market options, not just about you. Then it's the recommendations of what you would do based on all the things you know. Once again, demonstrating your expertise about them, about their industry, about the problem that they're trying to solve, that allows them to make a choice. And there's several rules about using the authority arc as one of your conversational structures, but that's a structure that allows even an early stage salesperson, by giving a structure, allows them to have a more senior conversation.
Is when you're working with an organization, is that something that you would help them develop out that authority arc? Because they may just say, well, I hear where you're coming from, Carajane, but how on earth do I create all this area from the data to how it means or whatever? Is that something that you typically
Yes,
when you're working?
yeah. So first and foremost, an authority arc can be in a single conversation,
Mhm.
but most of the time, I'll be honest with you, the authority arc is what plays out as a part of a stage gate sales process.
Yeah,
Your buyers are going through a buying process, and buying processes lead sales processes.
yeah,
And so your sales process, we think we're just responding to the buyers. But what we're really doing is moving through this authority arc conversation, but we haven't really thought about it in that way, and we haven't built it out structurally and strategically to accomplish the goals we're trying to accomplish.
interesting.
And so, yes, our stage gate sales process
Yeah.
takes that into consideration as we build out their sales process with them.
Yeah, and it's all very well and good having a sales process, but again, as we all know, that you think things are going swimmingly, and then there's some challenges that crop up. And I think one of the things that you call back is the eel in the deal. You think you've got everything nailed, and yet there's maybe one person in the
Yes.
company who's got reservations, who's got
Yes.
an agenda, who's got a concern. So just
Yes.
talk us a bit more about the eel in the deal and how you help people navigate through that particular area.
Yeah. So the eel in a deal is fantastic, because what they are is they're a person that then represents an not wanting to change, or not wanting to change now,
Yeah.
or a competitor, or something else. So they're representing the negative to what you're trying to accomplish. So that's what an
Yeah.
eel is. Right. So first we have to figure out what is it that is their challenge. We need to understand how much influence they have in the buying process, right? To do that. But salespeople like to talk to people that like to talk to them. And so we avoid eels. And that's the worst thing you want to do.
Yeah.
You want to bring the eel into the conversation. You want to bring them into the conversation early. You want to really understand what are their concerns, what are their thresholds of measurements, what is the issues that they're trying to solve. And then when you know that, you now need to mitigate those. Demonstrate why those fears are unreasonable fears, or you have solved those fears. In a way that hopefully our first job is to flip them so they become positive. They want to be heard. Most of the time, they're loud because they want to be heard. They don't
Yeah.
think anybody in their organization's listening to them, and they want you to hear them. So demonstrate you've heard them, and then take that fear off the table. First, you want to flip them so that they're positive. If you can't flip them to positive, you want to make it just not a big issue. You want to demonstrate that it's not the issue that they're making it to be. And lastly, if you can't do any of those, you try to make sure you can get them out of the sales process.
Interesting.
You eliminate them.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what? They can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I remember, and this is not a hunt for a big sale, but just working for a coaching new coaching client, and I was lucky enough to get this client. But I know I was up against, and it doesn't happen this often, but 2 or 3 other coaches who were also pitching for the same business. I said to them afterwards, well, why did you go for me? And he said, it's very simple, Neil. I actually had a chat with my receptionist. And she dismissed 2 of the others totally out of hand because they were rude to her,
Yeah.
or him, or whatever it was. And you have to be so much on your guard for every single step of the way. You don't know where the eel in the deal might be. It might be this very sophisticated level, but even for us selling, at a sort of, much smaller level, just recognizing all those touch points. And if you don't think that receptionist is particularly high enough to make a difference, believe you me, they can sometimes scupper even the largest deals.
Absolutely, because why? If they're the receptionist, or if they're the ones that are the executive assistant to the person you're talking to, they have to deal with you every time. And if they don't want to deal with you,
Yeah.
you're going to tell them right up front.
Yeah. But also, I think you're seeing the real person. So you kind of, you might be a bit dismissive to that person, then be on your best behavior when you're at the pitch or in front of the board. So I think, again, it's a really, really good point you make there. And I guess one of the most frustrating things is we've done a great job, but they then come back and say, not now, or thanks for showing up, but we've gone somewhere else. So you talk about in terms of maybe the key, well, you talk about sort of helping people to not be afraid to buy in the book. So what are the keys to really helping people who are maybe procrastinating, don't want to shift, or don't want to make a decision right now? What are the keys that we can learn from you in terms of moving through that?
Well, first and foremost, I think you made a couple of points that there are people in that process that can say no, that might not look like they're influential. So they can stall a deal, or they can make it smaller, right? Or later. So they can bring up issues that are not, they're not influential, but the no trumps the yes. So even if you've got the executive to say yes, and that's why we think it's going swimmingly, and they like us and they like our solutions, it's the other people in the room that really have more authority, because it's the power to say no, which will trump the power to say yes. So that's one thing. Two, we talk about the fact that it's a multi-touch. You have to understand each of those people individually. How does your solution touch them? What are they personally afraid of,
Yeah.
concerned about, struggling with? And we have to address them individually. So many times, because at an average deal, we're talking to one, maybe two people, they have a shared concern. We solve that one shared concern, and that's the deal, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works in large deals. We got to take one person at a time, and we got to deal with each of their concerns, not because it's not just the corporate's concern. It's 9 to 11 people who have concerns.
Yeah.
We have to address all of those concerns in a way that makes them feel confident that we are the right solution. Lastly, the number of organizations that when we first start talking to them, they don't know what the measurement of success looks like. They've never asked for it. And so if you don't know what the measure of success is, and we keep talking about we're a better answer, but we don't demonstrate our measurements and how our measurements compare to their measurements of success, there's no belief or confidence. And that's why they don't buy.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I get it entirely. Couple of final questions really around the sales sort of area. What trends are you seeing? Anything? I mean, we talk about AI being the big buzzword at the moment, and GPT and whatever. Are you seeing any insight at all, Carajane, that machine learning, AI, Chat GPT has having an impact on the way that people are either preparing or coming into a big sales pitch?
I think it's starting to have an impact. I think that it is going to become an issue in the future that we need to address. We can't wait for it to show up if we want to be competitive, right?
Yeah.
First and foremost, AI and the machine learning is going to take a lot of the transactional sales that aren't right now digital, and make them digital, right?
Yeah.
Which means that your transactional sales force needs to be able to shift to a different role. And most likely that role is going to move to that larger, more complex sale. AI is not going to be able to replace the complexity of a large sale. So you're going to see more sales in which salespeople are going to need to be at the larger level. The other side of it is AI answers a whole bunch of issues for the prep. What are the market trends? What's going on? Who are the people? I mean, you can get more information than you ever want to know about a lot of things. And so part of we have to elevate our game. We're now at the stage where we got to learn how to elevate our game and use the technology of AI to be a part of that elevation of the game. We got to show up better. We got to show up prepared, and we got to show up as the expert that we are. And that means that the sales team and the sales leadership are now going to have to raise the game using AI to be able to handle those bigger complex sales. You're not going to see those go the way of transactionals in a digital environment, because it really relies too much on the nuances of the problems that your customer needs to solve specifically. Large deals oftentimes requires customization, and it's going to be a while before ChatGPT and Bard can handle customization on complex sales touching multiple people, right?
Yeah.
So that means that's where the sales are going to go. And so teams and trainers, leaders are going to need to elevate themselves and their team's game in that.
Very neat. Very neat. Final few questions. Carajane, how do you keep on top of your game?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I am a believer in that you got to feed your brain, right? So I am a big podcast listener, right? So I listen to podcasts, I read books. I'm part of executive leadership teams where I'm meeting to learn more about leadership skills, what's going on in the marketplace as a whole, trends, right? The other thing that keeps me on my game is the fact that I am a consultant. And so I speak with lots of senior leaders in multiple industries across the world. So I use those conversations to understand what is happening, what the trends are, but also to stay relevant in the game of sales, right? The large sales, the nuances that are happening. We might have something happening in this market segment or this industry that we're not seeing over here, right? And so by doing that and having those conversations, take and pay attention, ask the questions so that you can be relevant. So that's how I stay on my game.
And what book are you reading at the moment?
Okay, so I do also run our business right now, even though I'm one of the senior consultants. And so one of the things as we're trying to elevate our game in the business is we're working on productizing a lot of what you heard. And so I'm reading the book called Productize because we're looking at engaging the firm, Vectorus, that works with service firms for scalable products. And so I want to understand that methodology, that concept, and how to think about our business differently as we're going into a far more digital, remote, self-guided marketplace.
Amazing. And who wrote Productize?
It's by Aisha Tierney Armstrong.
Right. Okay. We'll look that and that, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes. And your favorite podcast?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I do like yours. I thoroughly enjoyed the one with Gucci on high performance.
Oh, amazing. He was outstanding, John. Yes.
That was a great one. But my favorite podcast right now is called the All In Podcast. It is a podcast that really thinks about, from a business perspective, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the US culturally, and how does that impact business and business growth.
Final question. If you had your time over again, what would you do differently?
You know, that's a great question, in that you're always thinking, gosh, I wish I would have known this when I was younger. I wish I would have known this when I was younger, right? So I would say there's a couple of things. If I have to pick one, it would say, don't try to always do it all on your own. I think that too many years of trying to do it all on my own slowed some of my growth, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is I grew up in an era of, we all look a certain way. Corporate America is supposed to be this way. We should, as small businesses, show up like corporate America, be a certain way, right? This external narrative that we had to play. And the other thing I would tell myself is be your authentic self, be who you are. And because the world needs you as you.
Yes.
And not this facade that we want the world to see. Because then in today's world, people don't want that facade. They want to know you and feel comfortable with you. So I would also say, be yourself, show up as yourself. And I think the younger generation does a fantastic job at that. I think our generation is still learning how to do that.
When you say the other generation, is that older or younger?
I would say the younger generation is better at it. I think we're on a little bit older side. I don't know.
Age is all relative anyway, so
it's a mindset, right?
Exactly. Carajane, so many thanks for joining us on today's Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. It's been a delight to have you on the show. And I know we've given a lot of it talking about the importance of finding big sales and the secret to big sales. I know your wisdom will help so many people as they transition from that normal sale you talked about to the much larger sales, and having a real sort of whole structure in which to do it. So we'll put the whole links to the secret to big sales, and I think we've got a few other resources that you've sent through for us as well to feature in the show notes that you can find out. And we'll also just remind us if people who are listening to the show say, hey, you know what, I've got a big deal coming up and I could really do with some expertise in my camp to help give us the secret sauce. What's the best website address to use?
Yeah, so it's huntbigsales.com.
Huntbigsales.com.
Yep, that's how you find us.
Very good. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's been a great fun.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review, it would really help other like-minded entrepreneurs find the podcast and grow our community. Click on the subscribe button to be kept in the loop for all future podcasts, and go to the show notes for additional reading resources and links to our guest. Until next time, thank you so much.